We're going to start right on time. I'm Gary Keith, Chair of the School Building Committee, and thank you for attending our second public forum. We were here in early January, and we want to update you on what's been happening since then, which is quite a bit. So appreciate you turning out, and thank those who will watch us on the Community Access channel as well. So our agenda for tonight is we'll just give you a where we are, kind of snapshot in time. We have a report due to the Mass School Building Association in May 1st, and we'll be going over what's going to be included in that. We'll look at the options, and again, we have not made a final decision at this point in terms of what the actual design or enrollment will be. We'll go over all that with you tonight so you know what the current status is, and we'll give you a good handle of some of the issues that the committee has been wrestling with, and I use that term very deliberately since January. And go over the schedule and the next steps, and then obviously we'll allow time for a Q&A at the end of the session, and I'll remind you this when we get to that point, but please, if you want to ask a question, happy to answer your questions, but please, so for everybody as well as our community access audience, if you'll come to the mic to ask your question, that would be much appreciated. So as I did in January, I just want to show you our committee members, and it's a big committee, and the MSBA has cautioned us in the past about our committee is too big, but we don't think so. We think this is the size of the committee that we had for this building. It was the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for this project as well. So it's 25 voting members and a wide combination of town and officials, school administration and staff, parents, and just well represented in terms of all the vested interests in building a new school building project around the table. And the committee is so big that we have to use 2 slides to show all the names up there. So again, as chair, I really appreciate the work that the committee has done. Again, especially over the last 3 months, we've been meeting 2 times a month, and with some pretty heavy agendas, and we've got some heavy work coming up to us very quickly, particularly at the meeting coming up a week from now. I know I've got a few committee members here. If you just raise your hand in the audience, and so folks can see who's some of the committee members are here. And again, I appreciate all the effort that they put in to date. It's been a lot of work. Our project team is represented here as well. Sean and Mitch are here. Mitch will be at the podium in a little bit. From our OPM, our Owner's Project Manager, PMA, and we really appreciate the work they've done, and our project team from our designer, and all 3 of the main representatives that we've been dealing with are here, Laurie, James, and Stephanie, and we appreciate the work that they've done as well. So this is really the headline slide, if you will, and I really want to cover up front where we're at and some of the issues that we've been facing and still have to face in a very short period of time. So right now, and you're going to see more about this tonight, there are 4 main options on the table. And I want to just compare it to this project right here. The same point in time for this project, we had 5 options. We had 3 renovations and 2 new construction options. So we're basically at that same point where the committee in a very short period of time, maybe even next week at the meeting, has to pick one of these options. I will tell you up front, before you even see what the options look like, it really is not the committee's will to look at a addition renovation option, and you'll see really why in terms of the cost and all that's involved in an addition renovation. It really doesn't really make sense for us as a community to look at that, just as it didn't for this building. But the MSBA is really going to require us to do that. That's part of their process as the Massachusetts School Building Authority, is to have you look at an addition renovation, just part of the due diligence. So we're going to do that with those 2 options. And then we have a pre-K and 4 new construction option and a pre-K and 6 new construction option. Now, just to go back a little bit at the beginning, when the school committee at the end of 2022 put together their statements of interest that were submitted to the MSBA, there were 2 schools under consideration in that original submittal, to replace Roselle and to replace Spring Street. When the MSBA received that, they came back and said, we're going to put that forward, but we want you to also look at the Howard School as part of the consolidation. For a lot of reasons, they're very much in favor of consolidation. So they made a request to us to also look at Howard as part of this feasibility study project, which we've been doing. When we started the process, the committee quickly, our school building committee, quickly made a decision that Spring Street was not a viable site, and I think anybody in this room would agree as to why that is. There's very limited parking. It's a small site. It's got a lot of issues, and the idea of doing any consolidation, even with only 2 schools, would not be practical at Spring Street. So the committee quickly dismissed Spring Street as a viable site. We then went to Howard because it was felt that in terms of looking at the fields that are there now and and looking at the idea of a kind of a central school district, that made a lot of sense to look at Howard. And in November, and I reported on this when we were here in January, the committee had made a decision to move away from Howard kind of for 2 main issues, one dealing with septic. Many of you may be aware that the septic at Howard is part of a municipal septic system that includes this building, Spring Street, Fire and Police, Senior Center, the library, and Howard School. All that feed into the single septic system. Doing any additional capacity on Howard for a larger consolidated school would require us to go to a wastewater treatment plant system, not a traditional septic system. So that was reason number 1. And then the second reason was when we were looking at the options for such a large consolidated building and what that would look like on that site, we felt that wasn't the right approach. So in November of 2024, the committee made the decision to move away from Howard and now to focus on Roselle. Having said that, though, and that's my next bullet point here, the pre-K to 6 enrollment, even at Roselle, is going to tip us into a wastewater treatment plant system. So, we made a decision to move from Howard over to Roselle on the notion, the hope perhaps, that we could deal with a wastewater treatment facility there, or maybe even just do it as a septic, but obviously that wasn't possible. And so that's the situation that we're in right now. Roselle also has wetlands. It had an area that we didn't think was considered a wetland, basically the area up close to Crescent Street that years and years ago was not considered a wetland, and now it is. That was an area we were hoping would be possible, a site for either a septic or wastewater treatment area, and that's not feasible. So that has very limited location siting issues for wastewater treatment. We think we can deal with the septic issue there all right, but certainly from a wastewater treatment facility on site, that's going to be very difficult. And there's a permitting risk in going forward with a wastewater treatment system. Septic, you're under local Board of Health authority. Wastewater treatment, you're under state DEP regulations. So we would have to get into the permit process before we'd even know whether or not we would be successful with the permitting of a wastewater treatment system. And this is at any location, but particularly as we're talking about Roselle. So we are going to reinvestigate, as it says on the slide. We are going to go back, because of all we've been dealing with wastewater treatment and the limitations at Roselle. We are going to go back at the meeting a week from tonight with the committee and just reevaluate all that information for Roselle, just to make sure that we made the original decision correctly at Howard. Can we look at Howard as a possibility again? We're just going to exhaust that one more time, again, because we made that original decision on the basis that we could solve the problem by going to Roselle for pre-K to 6, and we can't do that. So we are going to look at that again. I can't predict what the outcome will be of that, but we're going to just go through the information one more time with the full committee a week from tonight. When we made the original enrollment certifications with the MSBA, one of the options we had that we have not looked at to date is K through 6. And the committee has not looked at this at all, but we're going to put that on the table at our meeting a week from tonight. Because if we look at K through 6 and we just take out pre-K out of the mix for the consolidation, which again is an allowable option that was certified by the MSBA at the start of this process, we could potentially have solved the problem with a septic system at Roselle and not have to deal with a wastewater treatment facility there. So we are going to look at that and vent that, that process out at the committee a week from tonight. Having said that, you will not see the K through 6 in any of the options that are listed up above in the presentation tonight because we haven't gone that far. And admittedly, I've already communicated this to the committee. If we feel like we need more time to vet that properly, you know, we may have to defer that May 1st deadline with the state and push the schedule out a little bit. We don't want to rush this and make the wrong decision, but that's a possibility. So a week from tonight, we could be looking at one of the options that are bulleted there up above at the beginning of the slide, but K through 6 could be on the table as well. But I want the committee to be comfortable with whatever decision that they make and make sure they feel they've got enough time to make the right decision without having too much of a negative impact on the schedule with the MSBA. You may have a lot of questions and all that, but just please save them for the end. So, I mean, I know I called it a headline, but it was a lot of information there. But I thought it was important to get that out to you right up front, get that on the table right up front, because some of the information, relative to K through 6, is not going to be presented further on in the presentation because, again, we haven't dealt with that specifically. All right, so the next formal report due to the MSBA on May 1st, as of right now, is called the Preferred Schematic Report, and I'm going to turn it over to Mitch from PMA to lead us through what the process is for that. Mitch.
All right, thanks, Gary. Good evening, everybody. So as Gary mentioned, we are working on a preferred schematic report. It's all part of the feasibility study. If you recall, from about September to December, we worked on the PDP, which was the preliminary design program, and now we're rolling into the we have been rolled into the preferred schematic report. So as part of the PDP, up on the left in the blue, you can see that we looked at the existing conditions of all the different sites and buildings. A huge goal was working on the educational visioning program to really identify the town's goals for their ed plan and how this new building would best suit them. We developed the preliminary options and eliminated non-preferred options. That brings us to almost about the end of PDP to where we are today, which is about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through PSR. As Gary mentioned, we do have the submittal date of May 1st, which we're aiming to submit the PSR. To date, we have looked at all the options and refined the options to the handful that you saw on the slide previously, the 4 options. So that involves looking at the scope and the systems, developing those a little further, looking at the massing of the different building options and site layouts. So what's next is we'll look at the final assessment of options, and then we'll select the preferred option, which will be a part of that, the whole PSR. Here's just a timeline of that PSR milestone. So you can see that May 2025, we're going to submit the PSR to the MSBA. As part of that process, we'll also go through an MSBA Facilities Assessment Subcommittee review, which is just a presentation on our preferred solution that we will talk about with the MSBA in the town. June 2025, so the MSBA has a certain amount of board dates that we have to go through. So once we submit the PSR, we'll then meet with the MSBA at their board date and hopefully get approval to move forward with our preferred solution. And then just to update everybody on the next community forum, at this point we're targeting fall of 2025 for the next one. And then I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie for all the options.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to start with just an overview on what we've learned since our last community forum on the Roselle site. So I think as mentioned earlier, we've gotten to the point now where we've had a wetlands engineer walk the site. That was part of what led to being able to classify that corner by Crescent Street as a wetlands meadow. So we've gotten a better handle on where those are, and you'll see there's another portion of wetlands that's kind of bisecting Stepping Stone Drive as you're coming onto the site. We've been able to take some existing soils samples to learn more about capabilities of the soils on site. That's definitely led us to knowing that there's a high water table, not surprising, on the Roselle site. And that has also, as mentioned, led us to the understanding that we're not able to install a wastewater treatment plant on the Roselle site. Oh, sorry. that better? Can you hear that now? Okay. I'll skip back then so you can hear me. Thank you for letting me know. So where we are with site investigations today is that we've been able to have a wetlands engineer walk the site, and that's what's led us to the classification as of the wetlands meadow up on the corner of the site by Crescent Street. We've been able to take some existing soils samples on site so that we better understand the conditions of the soils, as well as understanding the high water table that's on site. And so all of those factors have contributed to the investigation and learning that we're not able to install a wastewater treatment plant on the Roselle site. And then I'm going to go through the pre-K 4 and pre-K 6 options. What I'll mention up front is last time when we had the community forum, we were looking at site diagrams that were very much just block footprints that were two different colors to say what's public spaces of the school, what's more academic portions of the school. So now we've taken the next step of those diagrams. These are still very much diagrams, not in any way final floor plans, but now we're beginning to lay out the spaces so that we have a better understanding of the adjacencies of the classrooms, small group rooms, and how those spaces are working, where the cafeterias are going, where the gymnasium is. So in general, spaces that you're seeing as kind of the orange and red, those are academic spaces. The purple bluish mass, it would be a gymnasium, and then the yellow spaces are the cafeteria, along with gray being the support spaces, kitchen, custodial, etc. So in a pre-K 4 ad renovation, and actually this applies as well to even the pre-K 6 renovation, we've looked at a scenario where the classroom bar of the existing Roselle school is the portion of the school that's getting renovated into new classroom spaces. Because of the nature of needing to renovate space that's existing and being used, this would need to be, both of the ad renos would need to be a phased project where you're building your addition, which is a significant amount here. So you're building that initial addition in a phase 1. You're moving everyone from the Roselle School into that addition portion of it. And then in a phase 2, you would go back and renovate the second, the existing piece of Roselle that would remain. So that does create a longer duration of a construction schedule, along with having, moving students and having students being in a building while a building is being constructed next door. So those were, as Gary was alluding to earlier, reasons behind the committee not being as much in favor of an addition renovation scheme. And so again, in the pre-K 6 addition renovation, that becomes a larger addition portion where now you have 3 stories of a classroom bar as opposed to just 2 in the pre-K through 4. And again, a pre-K through 6 enrollment does require a wastewater treatment plant, which we are not able to do on the Roselle site. So in a pre-K 4 new construction, we're able to, in this scheme, kind of break out the grade enrollments to have a pre-K K first wing, and then a second, third, and fourth wing. And that's a similar configuration when we get to pre-K 6, where we're trying to keep pre-K and K together. And then as you move up through the building, then that becomes the upper grades. So now at this stage of the project, we have begun to do cost estimates for it. These cost estimates are a way to compare kind of apples and apples, but apples to apples between all of the projects. They're still at a feasibility study level. They're used, the ad reno portions of, the ad reno schemes are including that additional timeline for the 2-phase construction. The new construction is assuming that it's just a single phase construction, so those don't have any additional phasing or temporary facilities built into that project cost. For all of these schemes, they're all inclusive of the same type of mechanical system, square footage of classroom spaces between pre-K 4, pre-K 6. There's still decisions down the road to be made for exactly what type of mechanical systems are going into the building, exactly what type of finishes are going into the building. So at this point in the design stage, we are carrying the cost for whatever that most expensive option might be. That is definitely not to say that that will be the final decision made. That's still discussions to be had down the road with the building committee. So the top line you're seeing is the all-in project cost. So that's inclusive of the construction cost, all of the soft costs, which include design fees, furniture and equipment. And then the second two lines are breaking out the MSBA grant, which is approximate at this point in time. And then the third line being the cost to West Bridgewater. And what's important to know about those approximate breakdowns is that while you have your MSBA grant that West Bridgewater has their approved amount for, the MSBA does carry caps on various line items that you'll go through within your project funding agreement. So for instance, the MSBA has a cap on the cost per square footage, which they will reimburse. So anything goes above that is not reimbursed by the MSBA. Same goes for site costs. They also have a cap on what they will reimburse for that dollar amount. So that does get reflected in what we would call your effective reimbursement rate from the MSBA. And so right now, the PMA team has worked through these numbers to do our best forecasting for what that will be, and that'll continue to get refined as we go through the project funding agreement. So to run through quickly, pre-K through 4 ad reno project cost, we're seeing at $145 million, with the cost to West Bridgewater at $78 million. Pre-K through 4 new construction at $144.6 million, cost to West Bridgewater being $80.4 million. Pre-K through 6 ad reno at $180.7 million, cost to West Bridgewater being $95.6 million. And the pre-K through 6 new construction will be $173 million, and the cost to West Bridgewater being $92.6 million. I'll turn it back over to Mitch for schedule.
Okay, just give everybody an update on the schedule. At the top, you'll see a couple of key dates. So today is obviously the community forum. It's April 1st. The next meeting with our school building committee is going to be on April 8th. And as I mentioned a couple times now, we're going to submit the preferred schematic report to the MSBA on 5/1. That's our target goal. At the bottom, you'll see a timeline of the MSBA process. So you can see where we are in 2025, still in the feasibility study. The next step would be move into the schematic design period. And then way out in the winter of 2025 or 2026 would be project funding. And I just want to remind everybody that we do have a project website. It's wbesbuildingproject.com. On the website, this is the homepage where you can find information about upcoming meetings. This QR code that's live on the screen, if you want to use your phone now, you can also scan it to get onto the website. A couple things to note is that at the top, you'll see project updates. Underneath that menu, there's 3 different categories. There's community forums, SBC meeting minutes, and SBC presentations. So that's where you can get all of the latest and greatest information on the project. And that is it. And I'll turn it back over to Gary for closing.
Thank you, Mitch. And I just will go back to this slide on the costs because you may have questions on that. But I want to, again, just emphasize one more time that K through 6 as an option will be on the table for the committee at its meeting a week from tonight. And it's one we have not fully vetted yet, but we'll be looking at another cost comparison that'll have information for K through 6 at that meeting. So that's one we may want to pursue. Admittedly, kind of at the midnight hour here, but it's one that may solve our septic issue at Roselle. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. And again, please, if you have a question, please come to the mic up front. You don't need to. It's not town meeting, so.
All right. So I just had a question on that. MSBA approximate grant. It seems odd that the state would offer more money for renos than new construction. Is that because of the line item, or?
It's not based on more money for the option, it's just based on the overall percentage. So it's coming as the overall percentage of the total cost of the project.
Because
The
you should
percentage is,
grant more for
the
new-
percentage is going to be the same. What may be different is the allowable costs. Stephanie talked about the caps. So we may experience caps for new construction that we wouldn't see for ad reno and vice versa.
And how accurate is the approximate? Is it locked in, or?
There's nothing locked in at this point. I mean, we're locked in right now at a rate with the MSBA for reimbursement for this feasibility study at 54.7 something, 0.79. But we are not locked in for what the rate will be once we go to them to get approval on the project.
Okay, so that's,
That's to come.
and for the big estimate, like just 180 million, so the town will get a loan for that amount?
Yes, the town has to
Lock it in
bond.
and hope to get a
When we come to
reimbursed?
town meeting, just as we did for this building, we come with the full amount. That's what gets bonded, and then we get reimbursed on the payment schedule.
Okay, but,
Mm-hmm.
and when are they going to have an accurate for that?
When we come out of schematic design.
Okay, more towards the end.
Yes, I mean, basically the end of this year, if it comes out of the committee with a successful vote, then we would have the final cost, and that would be the number we'd bring to MSBA, that would be the number we'd bring to the town for a vote.
Okay.
So probably in the January timeframe for town meeting.
And you guys aren't going to involve with like the cuts, like, or the administrative, if you go to one school, what's going to happen? That's not part of your
No, it's
proposal.
not. No, that's the operating budget between the school administration and the school committee.
All right, that's all that's on the top of my mind. Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Have they considered wrapping the library up into the Howard site, possibly using that pad, that spot, and maybe moving the library to the Roselle or the Spring Street instead?
No,
Giving more room for a footprint for a school?
yeah, no, there's no consideration on doing anything with the library, and it would not be something the MSBA would consider as part of working with us to take over the library and incorporate if the town wanted to do that, that would be 100% town expense. It would not be part of any,
Add that to as a building site for the new school?
yeah, it wouldn't be part of any calculation that the MSBA would endorse. Yeah.
See what we have.
Well, speaking of locations for the school, since there's going to be issues with Roselle and wastewater treatment plant, what about locating it at the Howard School, where years ago it used to be the Howard Seminary, which was a big school, and I don't know how many grades were in that, but put that there for the K through 6, then renovate the Howard School for the 6th grade, kindergarten or whatever, knock down the Roselle, use that for the school fields, knock down Spring Street, and use that for a field, or eventually for the future of more room for the high school here.
Let me make
And
sure
make
I'm
the
following
waste-
your question correctly.
and
You're
make the
you're
wastewater
suggesting, the suggestion is to build another school at the Howard site, but maintain the existing Howard school as well?
Renovate it after the new school gets there and use that for, you can use it for a bigger auditorium, knock down the other two schools, and use
I mean, the only thing
wastewater treatment plant for
Yeah.
all of that.
I don't think we would ever end up with two separate school buildings on the Howard site, but part of the
No,
study.
you connect it to the Howard School.
Yeah, part of the study at Howard that we've already done in terms of looking at site plans, and we're going to reevaluate next week, is to look at an ad renovation at Howard as well. That was part of, just like we did at Roselle.
Why not combine everything all at once, put it in one spot like it used to be? Take care of the other schools, use one spot for fields,
Right. If we
The
go
other
to
one's for
Howard,
addition on here, because we're gonna need more space for this school.
if we go to Howard, the only option we consider at Howard is pre-K to 6. We cannot consider any other option. We have to combine all three schools into a pre-K 6 option. But we can look at add renovation as well as new construction, just like we've done at
Yeah, add
at
it all
Roselle.
there, and that's where all the K through 6, everything's all right there in that area.
That is one of the options. But again, as I mentioned earlier, we have wastewater treatment issues at the Howard site because we're adding to that capacity to the municipal system, which is already at capacity.
I understand that, but that's why you build the plant.
Right, but the plant is going to have on-site issues at Howard being able to have the space with that size school.
What kind of issues?
Just the acreage to be able to do it, to be able to do the wastewater treatment plant and that sizable school to have to do the
It's not enough
space.
with the school fields there now?
It's going to be, it's very tight. One of the issues
It's gonna
that.
be tight at the Roselle, too.
One of the issues we had with the Howard site initially, in terms of the committee looking at it, was the effect on the senior center and the traffic flow with the senior center, the traffic flow just with adding. I mean, we're designing pre-K to 6. The enrollment figure we've certified with the state is over 1,000 students. So folks that drive on Howard Street during school time now see the congestion there that's with the existing Howard School. Then you're going to add those other tools. I mean, obviously, you'd stagger times and so forth probably, but it's a very tight site. I mean, it seems you've got a lot of space with the fields, but by the time you're going to put the building to consolidate all those three, it's a challenge, and that's why we dismissed it originally, but we are going to revisit
Have you
it.
proposed actually looking at a plan on doing that? Or you just dismissed it and said no?
No. We did site plans in November when we took the vote initially, and those will be
Is the
reevaluated
Howard
next
School
week.
going to have to be done over eventually in the next few years?
I can't speak to that
I'm
about
sure
what
it
the
will.
plan.
So,
I mean, if we go.
that's more of an expense right there we got to add to it, so why don't we do it all at once?
If we go pre-K to 4 as an option, then 5 and 6 would stay at Howard. I mean, admittedly, out of the three buildings, Howard has the most life in it left. It had a full bare-to-bones renovation. It was 30 years ago, but it went down to the steel. But,
What about the septic system? Is that going to have any issues that's there now?
no.
How long, when was that
Well,
done last?
I'm
The
sorry.
septic system that's existing there now for the schools, Howard and the fire department and all that, is that going to have any issues?
We're aware that it's got life left in it with
much life,
with
you
its
know?
existing capacity. I can't speak to a number on that, so.
What's going to happen next couple of years?
The previous person somewhat picked up on where I was heading here. The numbers that are up there doesn't include, if you go pre-K to 4, those numbers don't include an eventual renovation to Howard.
They do not.
Do we have a sense of what that number would be?
We
Because you were
have,
talking earlier about comparing apples to apples. It's pretty hard to compare apples to apples if you're leaving out a big segment of what a potential cost might be.
I mean, the theory is if you did a pre-K to 4 on day one when that school opens, that Howard could function with 5 and 6 for some period of time before anything. There's nothing pressing that would force us to do a major renovation project on day one when pre-K to 4 opens and 5 and 6 are still in Howard. Would you want to do something with that building at some point down the road? Yes, no doubt. And but I don't know. We haven't looked at what the time frame that would be for that, and obviously what the expense would be. But your assumption is correct that at some point there would be a need to do some sort of renovation at Howard sometime down the road. And we would then have to go back to the MSBA and initiate a request for a new project for Howard.
Wasn't there a display months ago that identified the various costs for whether we just renovate everything as compared to building new?
This is it. When we came in front of you in January, we had not done any cost evaluations whatsoever.
I would disagree with that, but that's okay. My next question was, there's a slight discrepancy between the model you have outside and the site map you were showing on here. Which takes precedent in terms of wetland?
At this point, there are concepts. As Stephanie said, we do not have design plans. We have concept drawings that,
Agreed, but I'm saying they're two different animals.
the wet.
What's that?
The wetlands are the same between the site plan and the model.
Stephanie, you want to come up here and answer the question?
Yep.
If you go
I'll click.
back to the
Yeah, I'll click back.
right.
This.
Now, that shows wetland abutting the neighborhood for only 4 houses, as opposed to the model out there has the wetland go all the way across all the houses along Goldie Road. And I'm just curious, which is more accurate?
Is it, yeah, no, I'm not sure. Are you meaning the house where the bubble says emergency access from Goldie? On that, the wetlands that kind of
No, I'm
like,
talking down to the right, to the front side of Goldie, where it curved. The model out front has wetland going all through there and pretty much into,
This one takes precedent,
this one takes precedent.
correct.
Huh?
This one is more accurate.
Okay. And where in there would you propose the septic?
But also, sorry, I'm gonna offer one more piece to that statement. The wetlands have not yet been flagged, so there is a process that will happen where they get surveyed and flagged and demarcated and agreed to with, our team and Concom, Conservation Commission.
Just as a sidebar, you may remember if you were here, I was up here last whatever it was, November. The model out front seems to make more sense than that map there, because you might remember I mentioned, I think it was 2 springs ago, the woods all behind my house were 3 inches underwater, which would imply the wetland goes all the way across from where you've terminated it, all the way over to that other pool that's out on the front of the property at the very beginning of the driveway.
I don't know which house is yours, and right now we don't.
Proposed.
Right now, we
neighborhood
don't
buffer
have-
Right on top of it.
Right, okay. Right now, we don't have wetland information off-site. This was based on the wetland scientist walking the site, and, these are approximate at this point.
And
And
was
so
the
what
basis-
happens once that wetlands leaves the site, we're not clear on.
And what was the basis for the display out front?
a GIS, within the property boundaries, which is, what we're needing to make sure our building is measured up against, has been based on the wetland scientist walk. Outside of the property boundaries that the wetland scientist hasn't looked at as deeply, and we're just relying on GIS data for that.
Okay.
Again, there's a process that will flag, that will identify exactly where all the wetlands are.
If there is wetland, you have to stay outside of 100 feet of it?
You have to stay outside of 50 feet of it. The 50-foot buffer, there's a process with Concom to negotiate, to go through.
You could still cut trees down in a wetland,
No.
and you can't, but you said there's a process to.
From 50 feet to 100 feet,
Okay.
within that second buffer zone.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is on entrance and exit. Now, you say that you can't do anything over you just made a comment that if we did it over at the Howard, that traffic would be unbearable for that and that. Well, now you're moving 1,000 people into a building with one entrance and one exit. Suppose there's a problem. Suppose you can't get down that road. I feel, even though we had said that it would cost us $1 million, have an exit on Crescent and an entrance on North Elm for safety. one. And for other, do you realize the traffic mess will be on North Elm if everybody comes out there at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll look to Mr. Bodwell, I guess. I mean, I'm sure there'll have to be a staggered approach on Roselle
Because,
as
I mean, we're
well.
spending $100 million, what's another million to get the bridge? But it's gonna make, I feel it'll make the school more safer, because now they can come in from either side if they have to get in.
Yeah, from a public safety standpoint, we have had a sign-off from, I mean, both our chiefs, police and fire on the committee. We have had sign-off on that, but the issue on going with a full access road beyond the path that's there now is the available frontage out on Crescent Street available to the town to make a proper exit or entrance there, as well as that area that's now a wetlands meadow, and be able to turn that into a road. That's a
Just
huge
seems that the
issue.
one, even though you say, well, we're gonna make it wider inside, but you're still coming out two cars, I just think that's more of a safety issue. And we need the school. I mean, the kids are the future, I understand all that. But it's just a safety issue is what I'm thinking about. And also, all the traffic you're gonna dump out onto North Elm, which is not made for that. I mean, 106, we don't even talk about 106, but.
Yeah, you're really talking Howard Street
I know,
and Howard.
yeah. I mean, forget 106, that's a
Right.
nightmare. Anybody
Right.
who lives in a town does not go on 106, we go
Yeah.
across it. But
Yeah,
that was
you-
my major concern, was the entrance and the exit for ease of traffic and also emergency cases.
Yeah, in a perfect world, I think we would want to go out on Crescent Street, and
Yeah.
we've talked about that, but I think there are just too many limitations at
Yeah.
this point. So
right.
I appreciate your input, though. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Yep.
I can hold it, I know. First of all, I had a catastrophic injury to my throat, so you're going to have to put up with this. I'd like to thank everybody here, all these people that have worked so hard to do this for this town. And I really underappreciated. This place should be packed. And I'd like to thank all the educators that are here after working all day, that are here in behalf of the kids of the town of West Bridgewater. I'm a retired educator, 40 years. I have a master's degree in education, though people think I'm pretty dumb. And I've also lived here for 53 years. And I wanted, this wetland thing really is a kerfuffle in my opinion. When I moved here 53 years ago, my first husband, of many husbands, and I wanted to build a house on East Street. And we were told we could not build a house here because it was wetlands. Well, you know what? Take a ride down East Street, heading towards West Bridgewater, to Bridgewater. And every lot where we were told we couldn't build because it was wetlands, there's a house on it. And I'm living on Copeland Street. And I'm happy there. But the point is, wetlands change. The definition of a wetlands has changed. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, we didn't have any wetlands. We had swamps. So, next 6 months from now, the state of Massachusetts, whatever guy who's in charge of water, this map of wetlands can change. You know that, and I know that. Whether it's from, necessity or greed for building or what, but I would be patient. You got to build a school for these kids. And you talk about safety. How many kids have been hit in the parking lot of Howard Street in the last 40 years? Anybody know? Any kids hit on North Elm coming out of Roselle? Anywhere? No. So these are matters that really, are not. We're wasting our time talking about something. God forbid nobody gets hurt doing that. But I think with the wetland situation, I think we have to press the state a little bit harder on their definition of wetland and what we can do. Thank you.
Other questions? You want the cost slide again?
Yeah, just, if we apply for the grant, is the town going to be committed to anything? Are we going to have to bring up a subsidized housing rate? I remember stuff before that for grants, the town.
No, the MSBA process is completely independent of anything else. So
Okay.
it's just they do a calculation for every community, and whatever that number comes, I mean, they look at all kinds of, they make all kinds of input and demographics into that calculation for every community, and whatever that number is, that's what the number is.
I got a 4-year-old, so thank you.
Thank you. Others? All right, if not, I don't want to belabor us tonight. So again, I thank you for coming out. We have a committee meeting next Tuesday, which will be pretty critical in the process. They're public meetings. Happy to have anybody witness the committee meeting firsthand if they so choose. But obviously, we tape those meetings and they're put up on the Community Access Channel. They're not broadcast live, but they are put up a few days later. And as Mitch showed in the schedule, we won't do a forum in the summer, but we'll certainly do one in the early fall and give you an update on where we are. Obviously, go to the website. We'll have information on the submittal on May 1st, and obviously what the preferred choice was at that time, and we'll be moving forward. So thank you for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. And don't hesitate to contact us through the website. There's an email link there. If you have any questions along the way and want to shoot an email question, we'll make sure somebody gets back to you with the answer to any question you might have anytime during the process. So thank you.